Before you keep watching, try something. Stand near a wall or sturdy counter. Lift 1 foot off the ground. Can you hold it for just 10 seconds? Don't answer yet, because something surprisingly simple happens when you try. You aren't just testing your balance. You're asking your muscles, brain, eyes, and inner ear to work together. And researchers have found that this tiny test carries a much bigger signal than you might expect. But here's the part that caught my attention. There isn't just one simple test researchers have been studying. There are several, and they measure completely different things. Your grip, your ability to get off the floor, and your ability to stay upright on one leg. None of these can tell you exactly how many years you have left, and none is a diagnosis. But together, they can give you something your birth date can't, a snapshot of how your body is functioning right now. And the first test is almost ridiculously simple. You use it every day, opening a jar, carrying groceries, holding a suitcase, even shaking someone's hand. Your grip. Here's where the story gets interesting. Researchers didn't study grip strength because they thought a strong handshake meant someone would live longer. They wanted to know whether muscle strength could act as a window into overall health. And the results were striking. One enormous international study followed almost 140,000 people across 17 countries. Researchers measured one thing: how strongly could they squeeze? Then they followed what happened to those people. For every 5-kilogram reduction in grip strength, the risk of death from any cause was about 16% higher in the study. Cardiovascular mortality was about 17% higher. And grip strength was actually a stronger predictor of all-cause and cardiovascular mortality than systolic blood pressure in that analysis. Think about that for a moment. Every time you visit a doctor, someone probably checks your blood pressure, but a measurement of your muscle strength? Usually not. And that's what makes this finding so fascinating. But there's an important catch. This doesn't mean strong hands make you live longer. The study doesn't prove that. It means weaker grip strength was associated with higher risk. Grip strength may be acting as a marker of something much bigger. Your overall muscle reserve, your ability to perform everyday tasks, your physical function, and potentially your vulnerability as you get older. So the question isn't, how strong is your handshake? It's, how much physical reserve do you have? And there's a way to test another part of that reserve without buying anything. But this one is harder, because it asks you to do something most of us haven't done since childhood. Get down on the floor, and then get back up. No chair, no table, no pushing yourself up with your hands if you're doing the standardized version. Just your body. Strength, balance, flexibility, coordination. Researchers call it the sitting rising test, and it's scored from 0 to 10. You lose points when you need support from your hands, knees, or other parts of your body. The easier the movement, the higher the score. Now here's something remarkable. Researchers studied more than 2,000 adults between 51 and 80. They followed them for more than 6 years, and lower scores were associated with substantially higher mortality. In that original study, each 1-point increase in the sitting rising score was associated with about a 21% improvement in survival. People with the lowest scores had dramatically higher mortality than those with higher scores. And this wasn't the end of the story. In a 2025 follow-up involving 4,282 adults aged 46 to 75, researchers again found that lower sitting rising scores were associated with higher mortality. The lowest scoring group had about 3.8 times the risk of natural cause mortality and 6 times the cardiovascular mortality risk compared with those scoring a perfect 10. But don't misunderstand what that means. If you struggle to get off the floor, it does not mean you're going to die soon. That's not what the research says. It means your performance may be telling you something about your physical fitness and function that deserves attention. Because getting off the floor isn't one ability. It's several abilities hiding inside one movement. Can your legs produce enough force? Can your joints move comfortably? Can you control your body? Can you keep your balance? That's why this test is so interesting. You don't need a machine to expose weakness in one of those systems. Your own body becomes the test. But there's still one test we haven't talked about, and this one takes only 10 seconds. Remember the challenge I gave you at the beginning? Standing on one leg. 10 seconds. It sounds almost too easy to matter, but researchers wanted to know whether this simple ability was associated with something much bigger. They studied 1,702 adults between 51 and 75 years old. Each person attempted to stand on one leg for 10 seconds. Then, researchers followed them for a median of about 7 years. About 1 in 5 participants couldn't complete the 10-second test. During follow-up, mortality was higher among people who couldn't complete it. After adjusting for age, sex, body mass index, and several health conditions, inability to complete the test was associated with an 84% higher risk of all-cause mortality. And here's the number that makes this test so memorable. Among those who completed the test, 4.6% died during follow-up. Among those who couldn't, it was 17.5%. That's a huge difference. But again, association is not prediction of your individual future. The researchers didn't say, fail the test and you're going to die. They found that the inability to perform the test was associated with higher mortality risk. That's a very different statement, and understanding that difference matters. So, why would balance tell researchers anything about health? Because balance isn't controlled by one part of your body. Your eyes are involved, your inner ear is involved, your muscles are involved, and your brain is constantly processing all of it. Every second you're standing on one leg, your nervous system is making tiny corrections. Your ankle moves, your hips respond, your muscles adjust, your brain processes the information, and you stay upright. As we age, balance can decline, and researchers have suggested that balance may be particularly useful because it requires several systems to work together simultaneously. So a tiny wobble can reveal something much bigger. Now here's where I want you to pause. Don't turn these tests into a competition. The goal isn't to beat your neighbor. It's not to prove you're younger than your age. And it's definitely not to diagnose yourself. The real question is, has something changed? Could you do something 5 years ago that you can't comfortably do now? Can you climb stairs the same way? Can you carry groceries? Can you get up from a low chair? Can you stand on one leg? Because aging doesn't always announce itself with a dramatic symptom. Sometimes it's much quieter. You stop taking the stairs. You start using your hands to push yourself out of a chair. You avoid getting down on the floor. You become less steady. And each change can feel so small that you ignore it. Until one day you realize, I don't move the way I used to. That's why these simple physical tests are interesting. They can turn something vague into something you can actually observe. So, let's make this practical. If you're physically able and you can do it safely, try the 3 tests. But don't start with the hardest one. Start with the easiest. Test 1. Grip. The proper research measurement uses a hand grip dynamometer. If you have access to one, measure your grip according to the device's instructions. Don't compare your number to a random number on the internet. Grip strength naturally differs by age, sex, body size, and other factors. What matters most for you may be your own trend over time. If your strength is steadily declining, that's more interesting than whether you beat someone else's number. And if you notice significant weakness, talk with a healthcare professional. Test 2. Sit and rise. This one needs more caution. If getting onto the floor feels unsafe, don't do it. A fall is not worth a YouTube experiment. If you can safely perform it, use a clear floor area and have someone nearby if necessary. The standard test asks you to sit down and return to standing while minimizing support. But don't force yourself to do it perfectly. If you need your hands to get up, that's information. It doesn't mean something is wrong with you. It simply tells you that this movement isn't as easy as it once was. Test 3. 10-second balance. This is the easiest to understand. Stand beside a sturdy counter or wall. Keep one foot planted, lift the other, start a timer, and see whether you can remain balanced for 10 seconds. Do not do this in the middle of a room. Don't close your eyes. Don't try it on a slippery surface. And if you have a significant balance problem or fall risk, skip the test and talk to a professional instead. The goal is information, not injury. If you can hold 10 seconds easily, that's good. If you wobble at 3 seconds, that's not a death sentence. If you can't do it at all, don't panic. Remember what the study actually found, a population-level association, not your personal expiration date. And that's perhaps the most important lesson in this entire story. These tests aren't really about predicting death. They're about physical function, and physical function is something you can influence. You can't change the year on your birth certificate, but you can work on strength. You can work on balance. You can practice getting up from a chair. You can walk. You can perform resistance exercises. You can keep challenging your body safely. That's where this story becomes much more hopeful, because a test doesn't have to predict your future to be useful. Sometimes its value is simply telling you, pay attention to this. Imagine two people who are both 65, same chronological age, but one can easily climb stairs, carry groceries, get off the floor, and balance comfortably. The other struggles with all four. Are their bodies functioning identically? Obviously not. That's the problem with saying, I'm 65, so this is what aging is supposed to feel like. Age is a number. Function is something you can actually observe, and that's why researchers keep studying these deceptively simple movements. But there's another important lesson. Don't obsess over one test. A single number can be misleading. You might have excellent balance, but poor strength. You might have strong legs, but limited flexibility. You might be strong, but have another health problem that these tests don't detect. Think of these tests as pieces of a puzzle. Grip gives you one piece. The sit-to-rise movement gives you another. Balance gives you another. Together, they tell you more about physical capability than any one test alone. And perhaps the most useful question isn't, what is my biological age? It's, am I getting physically weaker than I was last year? That's a question you can actually do something about. So, here's your challenge. Save this video. Try the tests safely today if they're appropriate for you. Write down what you were able to do. Then repeat the same tests in a few months. Not tomorrow. Not every hour. And definitely not obsessively. Just occasionally. Because your trend may tell you more than one isolated result. Are you maintaining your strength? Your mobility? Your balance? And if one of these tests suddenly feels much harder than it used to, don't immediately search for a diagnosis online. Talk to your doctor or another qualified healthcare professional, especially if the change is sudden or accompanied by other symptoms. Because these tests are screening clues, not medical diagnoses. And that's actually what makes them useful. They can start a conversation. I've noticed my balance has changed. I'm struggling to get up from the floor. I've lost strength. Those are much more useful conversations than simply saying, I'm getting old. Getting older is inevitable, but losing function isn't something you have to simply accept without paying attention. And here's the question I want you to remember. If your body gave you a warning sign today, would you notice it? Maybe it would be a weaker grip. Maybe getting up from the floor. Maybe those 10 seconds on one leg. The fascinating thing is that none of these tests requires an expensive scan. No blood draw. No complicated machine. Just movement. And researchers have spent years studying what those movements can tell us about physical health. So don't think of these tests as a countdown clock. Think of them as a dashboard light. A dashboard light doesn't tell you exactly how long your car will last. It tells you something deserves your attention. And that's how you should think about these tests. Not, how many years do I have left, but what part of my physical health should I pay more attention to? That question is much more useful. If your balance needs work, train it safely. If your strength is declining, discuss appropriate resistance training. If getting up is difficult, work on the underlying abilities with professional guidance when needed. Small changes can become meaningful habits. Because the goal of longevity isn't simply adding years to a number, it's preserving the ability to use those years. Walking, climbing stairs, carrying things, playing with your grandchildren, getting up from the floor, living independently. So, try the 10-second test. Then, ask yourself something much more important than, how old is my body? Ask, what can I do today that I couldn't do 5 years ago? And perhaps even more importantly, what do I want my body to still be able to do 5 years from now? Because your chronological age is already written down. But your physical capabilities are something you can still work on, and that might be the most encouraging part of all. If this video made you test your balance, grip, or ability to get off the floor, tell me in the comments which one surprised you most, and subscribe to Life Code for more evidence-based videos about aging, strength, and staying healthy as you get older.